Welcome to Accreditation Made Easy, the podcast that takes the stress out of accreditation. I am your host, Arika Jewell, and in each episode, we'll deliver actionable tips, expert insights, and practical strategies to help streamline the process. And of course, make your work life a little easier. Now, whether you're tackling policies, preparing for assessments, or just looking for ways to stay ahead, we've got you covered. Let's simplify accreditation, one step at a time. Hey friends, welcome back to another episode of Accreditation Made Easy. I am your host, Arika Jewell. Today, I want to talk about something that happens after every mock assessment, the recommendations. And I want to talk about how to turn those recommendations into an actual action plan. Let's be honest. The value of a mock assessment isn't simply identifying issues. The value comes from what happens after the assessors leave. Now, over the years, and I mean many years of doing assessments, which I've probably been doing them for about 16 years now. And when I'm assessing other agencies, which include a lot of mock assessment, I've seen them collect mock assessment notes in all sorts of ways. They want them in Word documents. Sometimes I've seen Excel spreadsheets. I've even seen forms, like printed forms, where the assessor has to handwrite their recommendations in it and then turn them all into the accreditation manager at the end of the day. And if it's in a Word or Excel spreadsheet, those are normally emailed to the accreditation manager at the end of each day. Honestly, none of those methods are necessarily wrong. The problem isn't in collecting the notes. The problem comes with what happens afterwards. Now, if you're new or you're not sure what to do with the notes and you're just going through them one set at a time in whatever order that the assessor documented them in, then this episode is definitely for you. Because with all the notes, someone, typically the accreditation manager, you, have to organize everything. You have to combine the notes from multiple assessors, however many there were. Then you should probably prioritize them. Hopefully next you assign them. But wait, that's not all. You also need to track them because you want to know that they got done. Now, speaking from personal experience, I've actually done the Word document method myself, where each assessor creates their own notes in whatever format and order that makes sense to them. And then at the end, you're trying to combine everything together in one master list and try to figure out what happens next. I've also seen agencies use Excel spreadsheet, and that's probably the closest thing to the process that I'm about to talk to you about today, because ultimately my process ends with an Excel spreadsheet too. But I think there's a better way to get there. And that better way starts inside PowerDMS, right where the assessors are reviewing the standards. Now, before I explain the process, let me tell you what recently prompted this episode. I literally just completed a mock assessment with my own agency last week, and I did this method, which totally reinforced why I love this workflow. Now, let me tell you about it. Instead of having assessors create separate documents that are emailed to me at the end of the day, I had them enter their recommendations directly in PowerDMS as tasks within the standards that they were reviewing. And the more that I use this approach, the more I can appreciate all the benefits that come with it. First, the recommendation that the assessor gives, it stays attached to the exact standard that it relates to. Think about that for a second. If an assessor identifies an issue with a proof, maybe a policy, a highlight, a label, hyperlink, the recommendation is sitting right there inside the standard. You don't have to search another spreadsheet. You don't have to open a separate document. It's all right there in the exact place where the work needs to happen. That alone is huge. But here's where it gets even better. The recommendations are being entered live in real time as the assessors work. So rather than sitting in your office waiting for their notes to come to you at the end of the day, you can literally view them live in PowerDMS. And if you choose to, you can even start fixing things immediately. So last week, during my recent mock assessment, the assessors were moving along, they're reviewing the files and entering tasks. Now, some of those tasks were for larger items like policy changes, and some were for updated proofs, but a lot of them were simple refinement type things. Things like moving a highlight or maybe updating a hyperlink, relinking a proof, or fixing a label. They were small housekeeping types of things that didn't really take much time. And because I could see those recommendations immediately, I was actually fixing some of them while the assessment was still taking place. I wasn't waiting until the end or waiting for someone to email me their notes. I was already getting started on those little things so I could spend more time later on the bigger recommendations that had more moving parts and involved others in my agency. I think that's one of the most overlooked benefits of this process. The mock assessment becomes more than just a review and a bunch of notes. It becomes the beginning of your action plan and a plan that you can already put into motion before the assessment ends. Now, a couple things that I want to recommend is have the assessors create a separate task for each recommendation. Now, rather than combining 5 things they have to say about that particular standard in one giant task, ask them to create individual tasks. That's going to make it easier to sort, assign, track, and ultimately close it out later. The next thing I recommend is having assessors place their initials at the beginning of each task. I know that may seem small, but it becomes incredibly helpful later. If you have questions about one of the recommendations, you immediately know who made it. And if the assessor wants a copy of their notes, which normally they do, I know when I'm an assessor, I want copies of my notes. It's so easy to sort all the tasks by initials and then export them to each assessor. Now, if you also need clarification months later and you're looking at the task, you know exactly who to contact. It's a simple idea, really, but it's a big payoff, trust me. Now, eventually, you're going to reach the point where you want to organize everything into a larger action plan. Now, that's where Excel is going to become your best friend. Once the mock assessment is complete, you want to export the task to a spreadsheet. And that spreadsheet you're going to turn into your action plan. You're going to add columns like category, assigned to, due date, maybe a notes column, whatever works best for you and your agency. Then get to work. Start categorizing the recommendations. I personally use 3 categories. I categorize all the notes that the assessors left me into 3 categories. It's going to be either about a policy, a proof, or that catch-all refinement one. Remember, things like highlighting and links and labels and stuff like that. Policy changes usually take the longest because they're kind of dependent on your chain of command to review it, approve it. Maybe you have legal involved, whatever internal workflow your agency uses. And because those items kind of take a little bit more time, that's why I recommend starting there first. Once you get those moving, then turn your focus on to any proofs. And if possible, consider delegating proofs. The proofs can either be delegated or you send emails requesting new ones, and that can be done while your policies are making their way through the approval process. Finally, move on to the refinement items. And when I say refinement, remember, I'm talking about those housekeeping things, highlights, labels, hyperlinks, proof linking, file organization type of things. And I say save those for the last because they won't necessarily hold your agency out of compliance, but they will absolutely make life easier for the assessors. Honestly, if you've ever assessed an agency, you know exactly what I'm talking about. The files may technically be compliant, but if every single standard is organized differently, links are broken, highlights are missing, attachments aren't labeled properly, the assessment becomes harder than it needs to be. So that refinement helps solve that. And one little trick I use in the spreadsheet to sort everything by the categories is I sort the categories column alphabetically. That's going to group all of the things together neatly in the order that I recommend, which is policy first, then proof, then refinement. Now, here's what I really like about this workflow. It combines strengths of both PowerDMS and Excel. PowerDMS is where the recommendations live. It's where the audit trail exists. It's where the tasks get completed. But Excel becomes your overall management tool. It's your planning tool, your assignment tool, your communication tool. You're not really choosing one over the other. You're actually using both for what they do best. And then when the work is complete, you go back into the original PowerDMS task, and there's an option to mark it off as complete. Now you've got documentation of what has been done, who did it, and what still remains. To me, this is much more powerful than a stack of Word documents sitting in a folder somewhere. Because a mock assessment shouldn't just generate recommendations, it should generate action. And that's where the real value comes from. So, if you're currently collecting mock assessment notes through Word documents or spreadsheets or handwritten forms and emails and such, consider giving this process a try during your next mock assessment. You may find that you're spending way less time organizing the recommendations and more time fixing them. As always, I will include a link to the companion document in today's show notes, and it will walk you through the exact steps in the process. Now, if you're not already signed up for my free helpful tips and resources, be sure to check out the link in the show notes or just head over to www.accreditationacademy.net/sign up to get started. And if you found this episode helpful, please consider sharing it with another accreditation manager or colleague who could also benefit from it. All right, that's it for today. Until next time, friends, let's keep making accreditation easy, one step at a time.